I couldn't move a single muscle in my body as I stood in the hotel lobby. I was completely frozen. As soon as I saw my kids walking toward the elevator and away from me, I was filled with terror and dread. The loud cackle bounced off the marble walls in a way that made me think of the sound a bell would make if it rang out to warn of treachery. When I looked at each of them for just a second, none of them showed even the slightest hint of emotion. Not even a look. My daughter-in-law Monica walked over to Raphael and whispered something to him. Finally, she was able to get rid of the burden that had been on her shoulders for so long. This load had made her feel something. They believed the cruel things she said were so funny that they couldn't stop laughing, as if they had never heard anything funnier in their lives. I had been eavesdropping on her chats, and there was no way they could have known because I had been paying attention to every word she said, including the sharp tones in her voice. They didn't know that every time they laughed, it would break my heart into even more pieces. They had no idea that I had paid for all of the reservations, which were all very expensive. They couldn't believe it since it was so unbelievable that it took their breath away. For a long time, I made a living by going to the town square every Sunday and selling pies. I was in a good mood even though it was cold and my legs were tired as I was standing on them. I didn't let the dreadful tiredness I was experiencing deep down show, and I gave out pieces that were still scalding hot to people I didn't know. They had no idea that all of the things that had been said before existed. The truth is that they didn't know how much time I had spent repairing ripped shirts, reattaching hems that had come apart, and sewing clothes for individuals who lived nearby for a few cents. I worked really hard to build up enough money to pay on a trip that I thought would be great for all of us. What really happened was that I had a plan for putting coins into an old biscuit tin that I had stashed behind the canned beans in my pantry. They didn't know what was really going on. I made sure that tin stayed safe like a treasure chest that no one else should be able to get to. They didn't know that I had been giving up simple pleasures like buying new shoes, eating hot meals, and riding the bus to save up enough money to make payments that I couldn't afford. They didn't know that I had sold my wedding ring, which was the last thing my spouse ever gave me. There was only one diamond that held memories of things that had happened 42 years before now. In that case, I didn't have much room to move around. To make my family happy, I had to sell the ring for a price that was much lower than what it was worth. I gave up control of the object, even though I looked at it one last time, even though I saw it shine under the jeweler's magnificent light, and even though I held back my tears as I let it go. They didn't know any of those things. I knew about it, though. I was shaking my fingers as I stood in the hotel lobby and held the keys to the room that the receptionist had handed me. Seemed like a part of me was waking up. They were still sure that I didn't have the courage to finish the job. They didn't know that I had a new kind of hunger and a new kind of strength that drove me. At that moment, they believed me because I was naive and didn't know anything. They thought that the problem was that my vision wasn't acute enough. They had no idea what I was about to do. They had no idea at all. This amazing lobby of the Golden Palms Hotel is where this event started, but it's not where it happened. The flooring have been polished so much that they are completely reflective, and the air in this area smells strongly of tropical scents. In fact, the trouble had started 3 weeks before that, on a Tuesday afternoon. Also, that wasn't the case. The light from the window came in with an amazing brightness while I was in the kitchen getting everything ready for my afternoon coffee. Since I became a widow, this particular workout has become a regular part of my daily routine. I was talking to my oldest son, Raphael, when I got a call. Most people know me by my name. "Mother, I have a great idea," he remarked when I called. I couldn't hear the tenderness in his voice when he spoke. He always used the same soft and lovely tone when he tried to get me to react in any way. My heart, which had stayed innocent, started to beat faster than it had before. He used words to create a picture of a trip that our whole family took together, a trip that included all of us. There was a lot of laughter from young people, sharing meals and making memories on this trip. I had put my faith in him because I really needed to feel like I was a part of the group, that I was a valuable member of it, and that I belonged. I believed everything he said because I trusted him, and the promise of a vacation that would be, just like the good old days, made me think that everything he said was true. As he talked about the hotel, the pools, the restaurants, the activities for the kids, and the breeze from the ocean, tears of joy filled my eyes. I've been worried by the idea of sitting around a table and laughing till we cry, which we haven't done in a long time. My granddaughters would come to me with hair that was dripping wet from swimming in the pool, and they would shout, "Grandma!" with such delight in their eyes that it made me smile. Instead of being the quiet shadow in the kitchen who cooked and cleaned as they made plans for their futures without asking me what I thought, I had come up with ways to reconnect with them. I was sure that there were other people out there who could see me. I remember quite clearly that I called the hotel later that same afternoon. When I was asked if I could make the hotel reservation, my voice said, yes, even though my heart was saying no. I always say yes, which is why Raphael asked me about this. The hotel only needed one person to book the reservation and promised to pay the money later. I was shaking as I told the person at the front desk my name. My heart raced in my chest as she confirmed once more that the price was $4,200. I got installments of $800 every month, which totaled up to a total of $4,200 in pension. For 8 months, I made a good living by selling pastries in the middle of town every Sunday. I had gotten together $800, even though standing around for so long hurt a lot. I had not even come close to that degree of success. I sought comfort in the idea that I would finally take the time to fix my problems on my own. I was sure that my strong commitment to love would help me get through the hard periods in my life. I tried a lot of various ways to fall asleep that night, but none of them worked. My husband put a ring on my finger and said he was my legal husband. That was 42 years ago. I sat in my rocking rocker and stared at the ring in awe. It was a picture of the story of my life. At the earliest light of day, I made my way to the place where Mr. Jenkins runs his jewelry store. When I got there, they gave me $800 in cash in exchange for what I remembered. Even though my hands were shaking as I paid the deposit for the room, I did it. From that moment on, every day was full of fights and disagreements. I continued turning down the thermostat in my modest house until the condensation made it so cold that I could see my breath in the air. I tried to save as much money as I could by eating less meat, bread, and other things. I chose to walk instead of taking public transportation. I realized that I would have to put my own needs aside in order to take care of my family. I told myself that all of these sacrifices were worth it because I was going to spend a week in paradise with them. If I could just find the happiness to carry me through that week, all the sacrifices I had made up to that point would be worth it. The day they had been looking forward to and getting ready for a long time had finally come. I took my time getting things ready. I put on some lipstick, curled my hair, and wore my most eye-catching blue outfit. My smile was so big that you could barely see my eyes, and I acted like a schoolgirl who had just gotten to her first dance. I had come across the cold, creeping truth in a number of different places, such as the lobby of a hotel, the street, and the car I drove. I was quite unhappy when I asked them to give me their information since they didn't want to do it. They were in a foul mood because I was there. They didn't even say thank you for what I did. They felt embarrassed and angry since they had no choice but to keep carrying the weight. It made me quite sad to see them go toward the elevators. They were overjoyed that they were free, and I was heartbroken. They had no idea that the lady they thought couldn't protect herself was going to make a change that would be remembered for all time. They had no idea that the lady they thought couldn't protect herself was going to make a change that would be remembered for all time. The receptionist smiled at me, which made me think that everything was going according to plan, even though I could feel the weight of the keys, which felt like an anchor on my fingers. At the time I was in the lobby. The only noise I could hear was the silence in the room, excluding the sound of my own breathing. I was always conscious of the storm of feelings that was starting to build up inside me. At that moment in my life, I was no longer a mother. I did other things also. The widow woman had to make the hard choice to pawn her wedding ring and pastries in order to improve her chances of finding love. I did better than her. I had changed. I was no longer the same person I had been before. They had never seen someone like me before. A woman who had been pushed to the absolute verge of humiliation yet was determined to take control of her own life. My granddaughter Mariana was strolling next to me as I walked to the elevator. The same time, I was making sure the receptionist knew how thankful I was while I held on to the keys with a vice-like hold. She was the only one who hadn't made fun of me behind my back, the only one who had told me that the language being used in the group chat wasn't appropriate, and the only one who had really connected with me. She stayed at her post nearby, keeping her eyes wide open since she was unsure. It was almost if she knew that the things that were about to happen would change everything. While I was riding up in the elevator, I looked at my own reflection in the mirror. I saw that the control panel's digits were starting to glow, which made the panel itself light up. It seems that the woman who was staring at me so hard no longer lacks the strength to keep on like this. It looked like she had lost all of her vigor. It looks like she must have been hurt at some point. Still, there was a clear feeling that flickered in her eyes that was different from any of the feelings she had shown before. Choose to keep up a strong attitude of determination that has been built up over a long time by sacrifices that have gone unnoticed. Then, show that you have willpower by holding onto a flame. I thought about all the years I had worked hard to help my kids. I made sure they had clothes and food to eat in case they needed them. I had stayed up with them for hours when they had fevers, and I had done everything I could to make sure they were learning well. I had set aside time in the mornings to get their lunches ready and make sure they were ready to eat. I set aside my personal wants and needs for a long time during the day. Given how I feel about the subject, I think it's vital for me to ask myself what I've been given in return. There is nothing I want to talk about or bring up. People shouldn't be afraid of the end of a professional relationship as if it were a betrayal. They were about to realize that they had greatly underestimated the wrong woman, since I am not the kind of person who would let someone take advantage of me and then throw me away like I am nothing more than trash. As soon as I walked into my lodge, I was blown away by how luxurious the whole place seemed. Seeing all that beauty made me feel so much that I almost cried. The bathroom had marble walls that shone brightly when light touched them. The balcony looked out over the lake in a stunning way, and the bed sheets were the size of a king and were perfectly white. The moment of truth came as I remembered putting all the coins in the cookie jar to make this happen. Even if everyone tried to stop it, the unpleasantness came back after the set amount of time. This art was so magnificent that it was beyond anything they could imagine of that would be worthy of it. They didn't deserve to have this particular point of view. They couldn't participate on this adventure because they didn't have the virtue that would have let them do so. It was really hard for me to slowly lower my body onto the bed, and my hands were shaking the whole time. I walked up and quietly sat down next to Mariana. Neither of us spoke a word while we were there. She had also just found a place to sit. She was the only person who had the guts to stay with me when I really needed someone to help me. For a long time, I looked deeply into her eyes. I have decided that I can no longer let things be the way they are. I asked her, "Grandma, what do you have planned for today?" She asked me the same thing in her answer. I kept my voice low and said, "I'm sorry, my love, but I don't know anything about that right now. But I promise you this, I won't let them walk all over me again." That night I stayed in my room. While I was alone in my head, the other people were on the beach, eating and having a great time at the restaurant without me. For 65 years, I stayed the same way I was on that day that seemed to endure forever. They knew that I was the one who kept her ego in check, that I was the one who didn't say anything, and that I was the one who took in the little bits of love she gave me as if they were the most valuable things in the world. But I had reached a point in my life when I was utterly fed up with how easy it was to guess what I would do next. They could no longer get to their safety net, their silent bank, or me as an employee. Instead of giving in to my tears and the sadness that came with them, I chose to call some people. I remember making my first phone call to the bank. I made sure to tell them that I wanted to flag my account so that no one could dispute the charges without first gaining my permission. She assured me that they would continue to keep a careful eye on things and that they would be in charge of all the work that was being done. Carmen was a woman that made a lot of people feel sorry for her since she was so nice and worked as an agent. I had only gotten 2 phone calls in all. Miguel, who was in charge of running the motel, answered the second call I got. He had been patient during our discourse about the issue, and he was still patient at that point. "Mrs. Lincoln," he said not long after that. My heart started to race in my chest as soon as I heard those words. "Williams, this reserve is yours and yours alone. No one else has any rights to it. You were the one who thought of the ways to get the money and came up with the ideas for the funding. Because of this, you still have full control over the issue at hand. He made it obvious to members of the press that they could change the rooms, remove people if they wanted to, and end the rooms. Because of what he said in his speech, I was inspired to make a few changes. It felt like the universe was watching out for me for the first time in a long time, and everything were going my way. I couldn't sleep at all that night. While I was there relaxing, I could hear the sound of waves breaking in the distance. My mind was in complete disarray because I was going through the process of looking at all the many options I had. They had been taking for decades, and there were no signs that they were about to slow down. But I've been giving for decades. I didn't show any signs of slowing down until I had almost nothing left to give. On a side note, I could now get back artifacts from the past. I remember how Raphael sounded when he talked to me on the phone. I remember him being quite arrogant as he smothered me at that point. I thought long and hard about the many hollow promises Diego had made to me. It was hard for me to get over Monica's terrible cackling. I paid close attention to how Anna looked at me, which made me feel like I wasn't worth her time. Every Sunday morning I would roll out pie crust, which always gave me painful blisters on my fingers. The ring was the last thing I owned that my spouse had owned before me. Therefore I recalled it. With each new thing that came my way, I became more and more aware of my determination. I believed that the events that had happened were the reason for the unfair treatment I had to deal with, since I thought they were still working under the same conditions. But the next day, they would find out that I was their judge. I got out of bed before the sun came up and before the first light of day. I put on my navy blue suit and got ready to go see Miguel at work. Even though he was a gentleman and a professional, I could see the moment of astonishment in his eyes as soon as he learned what I wanted to do. "Is that without a doubt?" he asked Mrs. Williams. I was completely sure of my answer and answered, "Without a doubt." I would want to ask for 4 of the 5 suites I bought for myself to be cancelled. He then said that the only thing that was still alive was his chamber, and he kept bowing his head more and more. I asked him, "Is there a specific time that you would like this change to happen?" "At the moment, it is 10 minutes after 10 o'clock in the morning," I responded. Miguel didn't say anything until they all agreed to wait until after breakfast to tell the truth and then go to their own rooms. He just wrote down some notes, promised to call security, and had me sign the papers that needed to be signed. As soon as I exited the room where I had been in his office, the air felt much lighter. I walked out into the world for the first time in years as a free person instead of being someone else's servant. I moved about acting like I was in charge of the situation. I felt my phone vibrate in my hand and saw that it was about 9:30. Raphael texted me, "We're going to get breakfast, Mom. Would you like to join us?" I smiled and kept my eyes on the computer, hiding a lot of secrets. I replied with "No, son," by using the keyboard to type out my response. "I have other plans," he declared. He chose not to respond to the message. I observed the waves crashing onto the shore while I sipped my coffee on my balcony. My mobile device continued to vibrate for the umpteenth time. It was exactly 10 o'clock when this occurred. This time the message was from Mariana. She provided me with a screenshot of the conversation that took place within the group. She wrote, "My perfect plans for today include." They went to the spa in the afternoon after spending the morning at the beach. They assumed that it would be easy to forecast what I would do since they believed that the senior citizen would remain in her room in the same way that she had done the day before. They continued to maintain the belief that I would remain silent and still while they went about their business of enjoying themselves. The assumption that I did not have the capacity to exercise any influence whatsoever remained to be held by them. I was so completely taken away by the emotions that I was feeling that I started laughing out loud, and my laughter was boisterous and riotous. This is a result of the fact that the impeccable nature of the procedure they were using would start to fall apart in a matter of minutes. 10 minutes after 10, Mariana sent me another message. "I just told you that your mother went to the elevators," I said. "There is a disagreement between your father and the manager." I leaned back in my chair and said, "I would say that Uncle Diego is absolutely seething with anger." The room was as quiet as the ocean's surface, and there was a breeze in the room. This time, they were the ones who were losing their minds instead of me. It was they who were asking for solutions for a change. I received a call from Raphael around 10:20. His voice was tight and scared, so I took a long pause before answering. "Son, what kind of trouble are you in?" "Mom, I'm having some trouble with the rooms. The keys aren't working well. Could you please come to the front desk to deal with this problem?" They were told that the reservation had changed. "That is definitely not true," I said back, my voice light and even mocking. I kept talking and said, "That's strange. Maybe it would be best for you to ask the person who made the reservation." "It's you, Mom. This is very important because you are here right now," I told Raphael. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you right now. I'm in a bind, but there's nothing to be afraid of." I hung up before he could say anything else. The moment he said, "I am quite confident that everything is going to be fine," I hung up the phone. At that time, nothing bothered me at all, and I didn't feel like I had to do anything. I had been spared from the harsh lies that had been told about me. Also, I was no longer bound by the duties that had kept me in a state of captivity for a long period. I saw Miguel and the hotel staff fighting when I was on the balcony, so I was watching them. I observed Monica move her arms in a way that made her look angry. She was really upset, and her face turned blazing red. I saw Diego come and go in a way that made me think of an animal being kept in a cage. I was there as Raphael tried to keep his cool, but it didn't work. Anna was holding the kids in her arms, and their faces were twisted into scowls. It was clear that the kids were really confused. I didn't feel anything at all. There is no such thing as guilt. There is no sign of regret. There is nothing else to be found besides fairness. I was standing in the same spot when someone knocked on the door at exactly 11 o'clock. "We need to deal with this matter right away and can't wait any longer." That is a very significant thing to think about. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Raphael, Diego, Monica, and Anna, who were all there. When I got there, I saw that they were all standing in a line, their faces showing signs of extreme fear, wrath that was beyond words, and a deathly pale color. I saw a couple of the grandchildren holding beach towels behind their backs. They seemed like they had no idea how to handle the situation they were in. "Mother, what did you do about the situation?" That is exactly what Raphael asked for. "Well, hello there. I have the unpleasant duty of letting you know that your reservations have been cancelled." Monica's voice was sharp and harsh as she kept moving forward. "There is no way you could have been responsible for this happening to us as individuals. We are your family." I whispered the words "family members," and they disappeared into thin air. As I kept looking up at them with a smile on my face, the sunlight flowing in from the windows of the hotel kept pouring over the floor. I said, "The day you decided I was just a burden to you, you cut off all of our connections." I knew that something had changed when everything got quiet after that. For the first time in my life, I was not a part of other people's reality. I was nervously waiting on the sidelines to be let in. On the other hand, I found myself in my own small corner of the cosmos, fully armed with the truth and the power to use it. In the end, they revealed that they didn't believe in my ability, which turned out to be a mistake on their behalf. At some point in the future, they would have to deal with the consequences of the mistakes they had made after a long time had gone. They made a mistake by not realizing how good I am at things. They had gotten to the point where they would have to pay for what they had done after a long time had passed. I didn't know them at all. They were complete strangers to me, as if I had never seen them before. As soon as they showed up at my door, I knew they were there. There were 4 people in all. Their faces showed a lot of different feelings, such as disbelief, fear, and rage. Back in the day, I was the one who cradled him in my arms when he was a little boy. He looks at me with the same intensity he would use if he were about to charge at me with his knees all scraped up, like I was an enemy. I remember Diego telling me when he was a kid that I was his best buddy when he was younger. At that very moment, he was still living there alone. His face was so pale that it was hard to look at, and he had his hands clenched into fists so tightly that they were at his sides because he was so stressed out about getting caught. Monica and Anna, the 2 ladies who married my kids, always smiled at me on holidays, even if they talked bad about me behind my back. In stark contrast, they gave the impression at this point in time that they were very much looking forward to letting go of a huge amount of anger. The kids didn't understand why the parents were yelling. They were behind the grown-ups, carrying their towels and toys. For a short time, I really thought I was going back to being the person I used to be. To keep the peace, I would say sorry or try to make things better. Even so, I've resolved to disregard that voice. She had buried the memories of the disaster deep in her mind, where they were hard to find. Raphael stayed cool even though he was feeling a lot of things. He kept his attention on the kids while he talked to his mother. He spoke to her in a calm voice. "Mom," he replied quietly, "please, we can't do this here. Let's only talk about the problems on the ground floor," he said to himself. He said he could explain everything, but the fact that his voice was shaking showed that he was not as calm as he was trying to seem. I stayed in the same place I had been till that point in time. It seemed like I hadn't been bothered at all. I was leaning against the doorframe with my arms crossed across my lap. "It would be very helpful if you could explain why you wish to fight the bank's allegations against us, as that would mean I would have to pay the debt. Please tell me why I am so sure that I am not going to be going with them on this trip and that it will not be anything like drama, Monica." There was a lot of murmuring in the hallway, and the words cut through it like a knife. The blush that had started at the back of her neck moved up her face, and she realized that her cheeks were burning. He looked aside from the ground under his feet. I raised my voice high enough to drown out Anna's murmuring, but I could still hear what she was saying. I was very angry, so I made sure to keep my voice down when I said, "You have greatly underestimated me and did not think I would ever be able to figure this out. You thought I was not desperate enough, naive enough, or too senior to deserve any consideration. However, there is one thing you have not considered. I am not as weak as you think I am." The silence that followed was hard to bear. The only things that broke the tranquility were the soft laughter coming from the other family in the hallway and the sound of the air conditioner. There was a brief pause in the conversation when no one spoke. After a pause, Diego moved forward and said, "Finally, Mother," in a voice that shook and hands that shook. "Please think about the kids. They don't deserve this. We can talk later. For now, I just need the keys to the rooms," I said in a kind way. "No, Diego. We're going to fix this. It's not right for you to talk about fixing things when you spent weeks trying to break me," I said, gently shaking my head in agreement. After a long, deep sigh, Raphael eventually gave in when he couldn't take it anymore. "You act in a way that is rude or unfriendly against a person or thing. We made a lot of mistakes, but I'm happy with how things turned out. You can't just leave us without giving us some kind of support. What do you think would be the best place for us to go in a circumstance like this?" I could tell that his harsh words were hiding something else. He was scared. I had almost made enough space for them to see inside my room without any problems. At that time, Mariana was holding her phone, which was giving off a gorgeous glow. They could see this. As I turned my gaze toward Anna, I spoke in a low voice. "Because of what you said to Anna, she is now crippled. Why don't you ask your daughter?" Mariana said after she told her all that had happened. I told her everything I knew about the conversation and the plan. Even though her eyes were starting to fill with tears, she kept talking in the same tone of voice she always did and raised her chin. She added, "Mother, I told her everything that had happened. I made careful to tell her what I knew about the plan and the conversation. I told her that the whole story included the plans you had for your grandma to get the money your grandfather owed her, and then go to her room as if you didn't exist." They looked at their parents, me and Mariana, with worried eyes. They realized that the family's weak show of unity had been completely and permanently broken. She leaned forward with her upper body, and her screams got louder and louder as time went on. "Stella, do you really think that this makes you any more noble? Is it really possible that you think you can make us pack up our belongings and leave this place without knowing anything about you? We are your family." I couldn't take my eyes off of her. They were frigid and hard at the same time. No one in a family takes advantage of another family member. This is entirely prevented. It is not right for family members to treat each other with disrespect. The family members don't see the lady as an annoying duty because she is the one who brought the family together. She had never looked scared before, and she didn't know what to say in response. The fear of losing the sense of safety that she had grown used to, the anxiety of losing the free ride that she thought she had gotten for herself, and finally, the words that were the last straw. You are no longer welcome in this house. Your room reservations have been cancelled. The hotel staff has already started getting your bags ready for packing. You can go whenever you want, or you can wait in the lobby until a member of the security team comes to get you and take you out of the building. You can choose what you want. I shall always remember the looks on their faces at that exact instant in time. I can't believe how amazed I am. Angry. It is a big letdown and a big reason for unhappiness. Their eyes looked so much like a hurricane that they made me think of how strong a whirlwind of emotions can be. Raphael couldn't say anything since he couldn't get any words to come out of his mouth. Diego rubbed his temples in a way that made it look like he had a headache that no medicine could help. Anna clasped her daughter's arm tightly between her fingers. She did this because it made her feel like this movement was the only thing keeping her from flying away into the sky. Monica also looked at me, and her look was full of hatred. When someone realizes they can't control a situation anymore, they get really angry and act like this. He picked a better voice than the one he had used before and murmured, "Mother," he begged, please don't do this. We can fix the mistakes we make if we want to." I raised my hand to stop him, I said in response. After that, I stepped back and slowly closed the door. At this point, the only thing to do is move on. I kept leaning against the door for a long time after the lock had snapped into place. I leaned against the door for a long time, feeling a shiver go down my spine. After she got close to me, she came up to me and gently put her hand on my arm. "Grandma, please," she pleaded. "Is everything okay with you?" I knew things were far more difficult than that, but I shook my head in agreement. I was also really angry at the time, in addition to coping with my health problems. I was also feeling some physical pain, but I was also enjoying a sense of energy that I hadn't had in a long time. After waiting a few minutes, I was eventually able to understand what they were saying. In the corridor, they were yelling angrily and with a sense of urgency, and it looked like they were having a fight with some of the hotel's staff. I could hear Monica yelling that things weren't fair. I could hear Raphael trying to use logic in his conversation with Miguel. I knew that Diego was quietly murmuring a lot of curse words. I drank the coffee I had ordered from room service and stayed calm as I did it in my room. For the first time, I was the one who wasn't racing after them and imploring them to pay attention to me. They were the ones hammering on doors that were locked, and I was the one who held the key. "Edwards, are you here right now?" Miguel whispered in a hushed voice as soon as the clock struck 12. When I answered the door, Edwards was there. I heard a knock. He also said that he had told the families about the cancellation and that he had done it in the most polite way imaginable. Right now, their personal things are being delivered to the lobby. The security crew is always ready to go into action when they are called upon to do so. Would you be interested in going to a social event with them? After thinking about it for a while, I shook my head. Miguel nodded his head in agreement and said, "Let them sit with the problem for a little while." After nodding his head in agreement with me, Miguel said, "All right, ma'am." The look on his face showed that he was looking at him with respect. His words made my heart feel better and warmer, even though I was very hurt by what he had to say. In response to the question, he said, "I must say that out of all of the people I have ever known, you are stronger than all of them. There is absolutely nothing at all that you would like to discuss. Is that correct?" That is absolutely correct, isn't it? If, on the other hand, one were to consider strength, solitude would be an experience that would require a great deal of energy. I spent some time with Mariana that afternoon. She stayed by my side throughout the entire visit. The waves were softly lapping at our ankles as we walked along the shore, and the sand was warm and comfortable under our feet. After a few days had passed, I finally gave in to my laughter and couldn't help but let out a giggle. I was unable to suppress my laughing at the ridiculous things that Mariana said, the manner in which the seagulls argued over crumbs, and the feeling of freedom that accompanied being outside without having to put up with the scornful glares of my children. I was chuckling, but despite that, I was aware of the fact that the storm was far from being over. In response to this, my children were adamant that they were going to speak up and comment. They would return. They would insist on receiving responses to the questions that they had asked. They would beseech forgiveness for the transgressions and offenses that they had committed. They would make requests of me with the intention of getting me to meet the standards that I had met in the past and of getting me to bring myself back into accordance with those norms. I realized at that moment that the real fight hadn't even begun yet. The most intense sadness they felt didn't come from losing their rooms. It came from losing control and power over me. People who can't control their own actions can be a danger to other people in a lot of different situations. People who lack the ability to exercise self-control over their own actions may pose a danger to others in a diverse range of circumstances. While I was walking along the beach with Mariana, I could sense the breeze tugging at the strands of her hair. Meanwhile, the shore was being pounded by waves that were slamming onto the land. I felt a feeling deep down inside that I could sense in my bones. It had been quite a long time since I had felt such a pronounced sense of lightness and restriction. For the first time I had such a sensation of lightness and unencumbrance, and that feeling of release was responsible for it. In spite of this, I was completely cognizant deep down in my heart that I would have to pay a high price for that freedom. People like Rafael, Diego, Monica, and Anna are not easily defeated. These individuals have achieved success by employing deception and have thrived by taking advantage of other people. Any decision that I were to make would most surely put doubt on my ability to make decisions. They would come back after devising offensive strategies in order to put those strategies into action. They would return with an even greater degree of power than they had possessed at any point in the past. Had it been the case that this endeavor had been successful, I would have been completely seized by a tremendous feeling of panic. Nevertheless, this was not the case. Because of that experience, I developed a much stronger sense of resilience. When exactly did I experience a moment for the very first time in my life where I did not feel any dread of their anger? I threw my arms wide open to embrace it because I had finally reached a point in my life when there was nothing left for me to lose. As soon as we stepped across the threshold into the hotel that evening, we were instantly overcome by a strong feeling of anxiety. It was such a powerful sensation that it appeared to saturate the air in the lobby. I had the sensation that other visitors were gazing in my direction, and I was able to come to the conclusion that they were intrigued by the spectacle that was playing out in front of them. Rafael and Diego were having a very passionate conversation with Miguel, the manager of the hotel, in a particular area of the property. Each of them was accompanied by their respective husbands or wives. They were filled with such a profound sense of grief that the redness of their cheeks became visible as a result. The dispute led to it happening. Initially, they made sincere pleas to one another. Eventually, they progressed to shouting. It seemed as if the very core of their voices was the sound of waves crashing upon the rocks, as if their voices were the embodiment of that sound. As soon as their eyes focused on me in the room, they abruptly came to a halt. After then, the quiet that descended was so oppressive that it was nearly unbearable to sit through. The way in which my sons stared at me gave the impression that I was a complete stranger to them. They were confronted by the woman who they had always been able to handle. She appeared to be cool and composed. They were taken aback by this because it was something that they had not anticipated happening. Raphael, who was drawing next to her, muttered the word "Mom." During this time, his voice trembled, and it appeared as though he was putting every ounce of effort into producing a grin. I shook my head and said the word privately before carrying on to state, "Raphael, there will be no further private conversations between the two of us. There are several topics that we need to discuss with each other. That moment is behind us. No longer will promises be made discreetly. Out here in front of all of us, you are free to speak your mind and say anything that is on your thoughts," he declared with a great deal of certainty. In spite of the fact that he was attempting to keep it under control, I was able to perceive that he was in a state of fear. His fists were gripping his jaw tightly. He did not have any experience when it comes to getting used to my tendency of setting limitations on stuff. He failed to recognize me as a result of the fact that I was taller than he was. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she declared. The sound of her voice echoed through the air. Estella, you are embarrassing yourself in front of everyone. People are staring at each other. Is that what you want? Do you want to embarrass your own family members in public? She went on. I don't have the ability to find the specific item that you are looking for. I turned to face her with a lot of care and thought. You publicly humiliated me by making fun of me and saying I was a burden. Because of your scheme, I ended up paying for this vacation, which made me feel ashamed and embarrassed. You made me feel ashamed and embarrassed when you arranged for me to be left with the debt. Monica, if anyone should be embarrassed, it is you, I said to her. Even though the other guests pretended not to notice what was going on, they couldn't help but gasp when they heard the commotion in the lobby. Monica couldn't say anything back because she was too embarrassed to say anything. Diego begged me, "Please, Mom," as he got closer to me. He kept saying, "Please, Mom," and then he said, "Mistakes like the ones we have made are things that we can fix for ourselves." When he spoke to the press, he said, "We still have the option to remain a family." When he looked into my eyes with desperation, I shook my head from side to side. No, Diego. Words alone are not enough to fix the damage that betrayal has done to familial ties. You can't fix it with excuses because trust is what families are built on, and you broke it. I could feel Mariana's hand going to the palm of my hand like it belonged there. She held on to the situation with all the strength she had left, and her face shone with pride. At a certain point in my life, I learned that family is not just about blood. I should have known this, but I didn't until now. Sometimes respect, love, and support are what make up a family. Granddaughter was the only one of all the guests at the hotel that day who showed me all of those things. At the time I thought, I'd rather die alone and with dignity than live with people who only see me as a way to make money. Raphael's calm mask eventually broke, and his face became as hard and cold as flint. He had decided to leave us, and you will always feel bad about his decision, Mother. He said, "You will die alone and no one will be there to watch out for you." He hoped that his comments would make me very sad. But his remarks didn't affect me at all. They just rolled off of me like water off a duck's back. On the other hand, I kept going until I was so near that I could see the horror that lurked behind his anger. Miguel took a deep breath and gathered his thoughts before saying, "Smith, I know you're worried about my ability to do the job, but I want to assure you that I am fully capable. I'm sorry to tell you, Williams, but your concerns have been removed. You are needed, Mrs. Williams." "Hi, Mrs. Carter. How are you doing today?" "Today I'm feeling quite fantastic. If you have any questions, I can help you. Is there anything you can do to help me? In the waiting room, your personal items are safe and sound for your safety. If you need help with this, our experts would be happy to help you find other hotel accommodations." His speech was delivered in a way that was steady, unrelenting, and completely perfect. He made careful to tell everyone that this reservation is only for Mrs. Williams and that she has already made up her mind. My kids came back to me after looking at him. They were angry and didn't believe what they had heard. Monica's response was, "You will regret this, Estella." What she said was full with poison. You will be filled with feelings of guilt and regret about this until you are old and your body has failed you down and no one ever comes to see you. I looked back at her with my eyes wide open. I'd rather be alone than with snakes. That's the lesser of two evils. They were in the middle of getting their kids and their stuff together. They cursed under their breath during this exercise since they didn't know what to say about the circumstance they were in. I watched them closely as they left the foyer with their heads held high. Even still, I saw their shoulders droop as they continued on their journey, weighed down by the shame they were feeling. When I saw my youngest grandchildren looking at me with confused looks, I felt a deep tightening in my chest and a horrible feeling of sadness. They didn't know that Grandma wouldn't be coming with them, which is why I reacted so strongly. I was looking forward to talking to them and giving them an excuse so they would know that this was not their fault in any way. I remained in the same position and did not move a single muscle. I was motionless like a statue. Younger folks may have trouble with some truths. They would have to wait a while before they could become grown-ups and realize what was really going on in that situation. As soon as the doors clicked shut behind them, the foyer became eerily quiet. As soon as Miguel looked at me, I could see that the emotions on his face were very inviting. "Williams," she murmured calmly and quietly to begin. "I'll make plans for you and your granddaughter to go to another hotel if you want to, where you can still enjoy your visit," I said in answer. I nodded in agreement, but my throat felt tight because of all the emotions I was feeling. "Yes, I would like that too," I said. "A place where we aren't always afraid of being betrayed and can construct sandcastles without worrying." That night, we settled into a basic boutique motel that was a little further down the beach. It may not have been as expensive as the Golden Palms, but it was a great place that was gorgeous in its own way. There was a courtyard with bright flowers, wooden balconies that looked out over the ocean, and staff members who greeted us with kind smiles. I recall the first time I felt calm and at peace. It was when I thought I hadn't felt that way in a long time. We would take long walks on the beach, enjoy the great taste of freshly caught fish, and talk for hours on end. We would talk about the paths we had chosen to take in life, the goals we wanted to reach, and the kind of family we hoped to have together in the future. There were a lot of sounds going on, but the only one I could hear clearly was the waves crashing. At that very time, I was completely lost in my memories and thoughts about my kids. I thought of a lot of different things, like Raphael's pinched lips, Diego's desperate look in his eyes, Monica's angry look, and Anna's quiet. I thought long and hard about every compromise I had made, every pie I had thrown away, and every dime I had been able to save up. At that same instant, I found something that made me feel two things that were completely opposite of each other. It made me feel strong, but it also made me feel sad at the same time. This is because I've come to the conclusion that loving someone isn't always enough to stop them from betraying you. Sometimes the individuals you reared become complete strangers, and you don't know them anymore. In some situations, the only way to stay alive is to completely ignore the rules. On the last day of our trip, we made a sandcastle by the water. Even though the waves and the rising tide were so strong that they could have swept it away, we were able to make it happen. We made it. It possessed a sense of self-worth, confidence, and a desire to rise up against those in power. Mariana made sure to put a shell at the top of the tallest tower. She whispered very softly, "Grandma." After a long pause, I asked, "Do you think things will ever go back to the way they were before Dad left?" "No, sweetheart. But that might actually be a good thing," she said. Then she put her head on my shoulder to relax. That was when I realized that I still had her, even though everyone else in my family had left me. In certain circumstances, the word normal is just another way of saying broken. That's why I knew it. She might be financially independent without needing help from anyone else. As the sun sank behind me, I made a serious pledge to myself that I would stick to the road I had chosen in life. I will never again beg or plead for love. In the future, I won't trade my self-esteem for the stupidly low amounts of attention they provided me. I will never let someone treat me like I'm a bother or a burden that they want to get rid of. They thought I was worth more than the things they owned. They knew how valuable my skills were, but what they liked most about me was that I was willing to help them. I was Estella Williams, a woman who once loved someone so much that she gave everything she had to that person. In the end, she learned how important it was to love herself before she did anything else, even though she had already given everything she had. I smiled as I helped you build the sandcastle, and we watched as the waves slowly washed it away. The lesson that the castle taught stayed with people for years after it was gone. It's not at all strange that you could find yourself in a situation where you lost money. You might lose rings, though. You might even lose family members. You will never forget who you really are as long as you can keep using the power that is inside you. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.